Chapter 21. Facing ElFuego Baca. By the time I could get my wagons ready to move on, Ethel was worn out and the baby boys were fretful and uncomfortable. When we got the wagons rolling, hope welled up in each of us for days had been hard ones. 7 miles outside Socorro, just as my teams rounded the mountain, we came upon 4 Mexican officers blocking the path with their car. The man who stood in the middle of the road raised one hand, motioning in the air with authority for us to halt. "Which one of you is Cochrain?" He cocked his fat head to one side, grinned, his right hand resting on the handle of his gun. "I'm Cochrain. What do you want?" I answered, standing. "Jumping bail, I hear. You're under arrest on complaint of Mrs. Clay Cooper. The deputy sheriff of this town and her lawyer. I am here to take you in." "I'm not jumping bail. I'm trying to get my wife on the train for Aspermont, Texas, and Latham here is helping me. I had planned to go no further than Socorro with her." "I'm ElFuego Baca. Does that mean anything to you, Americano?" It did. I had to recognize him from pictures I had seen, but I was not afraid of him. Most of the Mexicans in those parts were. "I only want to get my family out of this mess," I retorted. "I'm the law in this area, and I said you are under arrest." He repeated his statement with arrogance unsurpassed. He reminded me of a big fat rooster stepping in high in mud. "I don't give who or who you are or who sent you. I'm going to get my pregnant wife on that train for her home." Latham then tried to tell Baca what we were doing, but it seemed useless. He sneered and made some statement that we all should have stayed in Texas. I got madder then. "Get out of my way, you slop-sided greaser, or I'll shoot you on the spot." I reached for my gun. I saw Ethel crawl back into her wagon. She returned holding a shotgun on 3 Baca's henchmen. She never said a word. "Out of our way!" I stormed. "These wagons are rolling into Socorro. It is 125 miles back to my home, and my family couldn't make a return trip." I intended to get my goods on the train along with my family, if I had to kill. I had ordered to let one of these men drive the wagon into town, then I would go with them. They wouldn't hear that. He wanted me to go with them, yet he informed me that I could leave the wagons blocking the mountain trail. His deputies had left their guns in the car, but when they saw Ethel and I both had guns, they didn't bother to come back our way. Baca loped off towards the car too. He muttered angry words all the way. His old puffy face surely was red. Baca was a tin god, only to his own kind. When I reached Socorro, I drove straight for the plaza, where I found the whole sheriff posse waiting for me. I made arrangements with an old Mexican to let my wife and family camp in his yard until I could put them on the train for Texas. I was then shoved into a filthy dungeon, which Baca boasted for them was for the likes of me. The next day, they lost no time arresting Latham. I was in my cell, wondering how I'd allowed Baca to put me in jail. The darkness in that hole was so thick I could feel it in my hands. I felt my way around the room, and the air was the foulest I ever had to breathe. There were 3 old cowhides on the floor, and all kinds of vermin in there with me. No bedding, not one breath of fresh air reached me. J.C. Latham stayed only a short time before the district attorney got him released. It was then the deputy sheriff filed a complaint against the district attorney for interfering with the sheriff's department. He did the same when I was finally released. About 11 o'clock the next day, my wife came to the jail to visit with me. I was taken from the dungeon to see her. She had the babies with her. 2 guards watched. Ethel told me that my chances for release seemed obscure. I told her to go on with the prosecuting attorney and send him to me at once. About that time, the guard shoved me out of her sight. And when one of my boys started crying from fright, the guard picked him up and pitched him into the yard. When he did that, I tasted blood. My boy struck his mouth, and he began to bleed. Attorney Eaton soon ordered my release. All this was a matter of record in Socorro's courthouse. I was allowed to get the family on the train while 2 guards stood watch. Then I was thrown back into that stinking hole. Though one and the other men involved in the NH shooting were arrested, bail was put up for them by Mr. Aragon and Mr. Smith of Apache Creek. They were out and unaware of what was happening to me. I knew if I could just get word to them, they would help me. I was really in trouble, not only for ElFuego, the deputy sheriff, his cousin the sheriff. He had an uncle who was a judge, and another republic was also a relative. It was indeed Baca County. I was a stranger in a strange land. I knew how to rope a wild steer, fight a mean blizzard, or ride for long hours in the scorching sun. But this was new to me. Slowly and quite painfully I began to see the error of my ways. Each of the Coopers were set free after charges were brought against them starting in the early of 1912 in that county. It was Mrs. Cooper's complaint to Baca that caused me to be arrested, though under a $10,000 bond. Case number 4087.5. She complained that my bond was not sufficient to hold me, and that I was on my way to Oklahoma or Texas, and that my intentions were to escape justice. This complaint was filed July 30th, 1918. So, with Baca by her side, I was bound over to the court to wait further action, and my bond was raised to $25,000. I was to remain in jail until the 15th of August when the grand jury would meet. This order was signed by Judge M.C. Matcham. The only thing for which I was glad was that Latham had promised to go with my wife and children as far as Bellin. And there they would change trains, and from there they would get to Snyder, Texas. I felt relieved knowing they would be safe at last. When District Attorney Eaton got me released, he ordered Baca to return my money and gun. Baca kept my gun and $10 of my money, but I was glad to see daylight, and I didn't care if Mr. Eaton warned me that I was in trouble in that area, and that I was in no means a free man. He led me to believe I might return to my family in a pine box if I didn't figure out some way to get out of town. I don't mind admitting that for the first time in my life, I knew a real taste of fear. I'd never mind facing a man in battle, but the constant worry of being shot in the back or ambushed is some fearsome thought. I desperately wanted to see my boys grow up. By the time Latham returned, I had been jailed a second time. It happened about 2 weeks after I sent the family on. I had written to McBride telling him I needed help, but I doubt that my letter even reached him. Things began to happen fast. I had gone to bed, and Baca came for me. He told me he was taking me in again. I asked for his warrant, and he assured me he would have no trouble getting one as soon as he'd got me in jail. He said, "If you damn Texans don't want to be in my jail, stay out of my country." I put on my clothes and went with him. He kept me off the street and took me in the back door to the cell. There I was in the dungeon again. I surely did balk at the door that time. When that foul smell began to trickle in my nostrils, I remembered. It took ElFuego and 3 of his men to shove me back into the hole. I stayed there for 9 long, miserable days. J.C. Latham finally managed to get word to Juan that I was being held. It was so good that ninth day to hear Juan's voice call out to me, "Byrd, come on out of that hole!" I was almost too weak to walk, and I had to have some help getting up the stairs. I knew I had been rat-infested hole for that last time. It would be Baca or me before I made that return trip. All of us had been billed for murder, but for some reason Mrs. Cooper was after me mostly. I went back to my ranch to make arrangements for selling out. I let the land go back to Juan and he bought my cattle. But one day while I was riding the mountain trail, my horse was shot from under me, and I still carry the bullet scar from that one. The man who shot me was a good marksman from a distance. Then September finally came, and I went to trial with a $25,000 bond over my head, and I felt I would go free. We were told by the grand jury that what we had done was a great service to the state by breaking up the Cooper clan, and that it was a breakthrough at last for cleaning up the cattle rustling along the border. We were acquitted. But ElFuego Baca was not through with me. I was not to be freed from his legendary figure. He stepped up to me right there in the courtroom, even while the jury was asking me to be dismissed, and slapped another arrest on me. I was charged again by Mrs. Cooper for the murder of her husband. I was so stunned that a thing like that could happen in a court of law, I allowed myself to be carried back to my cell without a word, though the bondsman assured me they would have me out in no time. Another $25,000 bond was raised by my friends. Baca seemed surprised that I was able to get a bond, but why me? The others were set free, and I was arrested again. Harmon, his sister, and Mrs. Cooper swore many things against me that week. Mrs. Cooper even moved in Socorro, claiming that she was afraid to stay out there in case I was free. About a week after the preliminary trial, and I had been found by bond given by 3 weeks before to appear before the next grand jury, March 12th of 1919, I was retiring one night as usual, but as I stepped into my hotel bedroom, I heard someone breathe and move, and before I had time to think, a knife blade was sunk deep into my left shoulder, and the blade broke off near the handle. I grappled with my assailant with my back to the lighted hall door, which gave the other fellow the advantage. He cut both my hands and gave me an ugly scar on my right cheek. He knocked me down, and out the door he went. I suppose he thought I was dead by the way he was bleeding. The wound in my shoulder had nearly paralyzed it. I still carry that ugly scar. The man's name was Miller, but I never tried to bother him for what he had done. I knew he had been hired by Mrs. Cooper. I soon received word that Ethel was ill. I appeared before a special court begging permission to go to her, promising to return for a spring term. Permission was granted. I'd been to the depot and had started back to town to get my things when I noticed a heavy cloud overhead in the northwest. I didn't give much thought at the time, but later on I gave it some reconsideration. I could see 3 men in a saddle of the street about 3 blocks ahead of me, standing some 15 feet apart. I knew who was waiting for me, Baca and his henchman. One always stood arrogantly poised with his right hand resting on the handle of his gun. Eaton had warned me he would be after me. Even his uncle, who had the county judge, had gotten word to me and been careful. He warned me Baca had killed many men counted in the line of duty. I dropped my reins over my saddle horn and rode straight ahead with both hands free. I could tell there would be no other way. Baca wanted a showdown. When I got within 40 feet of them, God must have intervened. One of the most vivid flashes of lightning I had ever seen, and the terrific peal of thunder shook the buildings, struck. By the time I could see from the blinding flashes, heavy sheets of rain had begun to fall. No one was in sight. It was almost dark, and the clouds hung low over town. It was only 2 in the evening. I turned my horse's head south past the courthouse and the mall, took the highway leading south, and by the time I'd gone outways of the town, the roads were dry and there was no wind at all. I moved on fast. I traveled on the highway to San Antonio, New Mexico, then took the road to Carthage. I knew ElFuego Baca would have to head me off in a car, and if he got me, for he was no horseman, and he was too fat and lazy to ride after me anyway. By the time I reached Espermont, Ethel handed me another baby, 5 now. He was 9 days old. Ethel's folks had been running the place, and they went to the Russell's County to live with their only son, as Mr. Hancock and I never got on very well together. I sold off my teams and cattle, as feed was too high, and rented land with Charlie Huggett, Ethel's cousin. Charlie and I had talked about my troubles in New Mexico, and he became concerned about my returning to stand trial. We both knew I would never come back. Huggett said, "Byrd, Ethel needs you to raise these boys. If you go back there, they will shoot you in the back, and if they can't get you any other way." "I know that, Charlie, but I can't skip out on Juan and the men who put up my bond money. Those men would lose everything they have." That conversation took place December of 1918, shortly after I first met him. On March 8, 1919, Wayne Ursery, Charlie's brother-in-law from Oklahoma, came to help him with the land while I was gone. I had to be in Socorro on the 12th.